Why did God choose David over Saul? David's election as Israel's king over Saul demonstrates God's preference for inner qualities and character over external manifestations. David was selected because of his faith, humility, and sincere devotion to God, while Saul was rejected due to his disobedience and lack of repentance. This story emphasizes how crucial inner attributes are to effective leadership. In this video, we will highlight some of the key reasons why God favored David. Number 6. Disobedience of Saul. Saul's disturbing pattern of disobedience to God's unambiguous instructions was evident throughout his reign as king of Israel. God gave Saul the command in 1 Samuel 15 to wipe out the Amalekites and all of their livestock as retaliation for their animosity towards Israel during the Exodus. Saul, however, spared the Amalekite king Agag and retained the best of their lambs, oxen, and sheep, saying the Lord would sacrifice them. Saul first attempted to defend his actions when confronted by the prophet Samuel by claiming that the people had saved the animals to offer as sacrifices. Samuel, however, corrected him, saying, "Is obeying the voice of the Lord more pleasing to the Lord than offering burnt offerings and sacrifices?" As Samuel 15:22 states, "Behold, obedience is better than sacrifice, and listening than the fat of rams." Saul's attempts to shift the blame and his partial obedience to God's command showed that his heart was not entirely devoted to God's will. Samuel eventually informed Saul that he had been rejected from his position as king because of his disobedience, saying, "Because you have rejected the word of the Lord, he has also rejected you from being king." Saul's pattern of disobedience and his inability to take full responsibility for his actions demonstrated a fundamental flaw in his character that disqualified him from leading God's people. Number 5. David's heart. Samuel's mission to choose the heir apparent from Jesse's sons was an opportunity for God to demonstrate how his standards for leadership differed greatly from ours. The prophet was struck by the size and appearance of Eliab, the oldest of Jesse's sons, as he examined them all. However, God informed Samuel that he had been rejected and not to be judged by his looks or stature. Because the Lord sees with different eyes than man sees with the eyes, but the Lord sees with the heart. This divine principle emphasizes how much more significant inner character is than credentials or outward appearances. God desired a leader who would guide his people with honesty, faith, and obedience, someone whose heart was totally committed to him. None of Jesse's sons were selected by God, as Samuel examined them further, that is, until the youngest, David, was brought in from tending the sheep. The unexpected candidate, whose heart turned out to be in harmony with God's own, was David. The fact that God chose David over other candidates, based more on the state of his heart than on his appearance or social standing, shows how wise God is and what qualities he looks for in a leader. Number 4. Faith and trust. One thing that distinguished David from Saul and the rest of the Israelite army was his unwavering faith in God. The whole army, including King Saul, shook with fear when the Israelites were challenged by Goliath, the champion of the Philistines, to send a man to face him. However, young David, who had been sent by his father to bring his brother's food, moved forward, trusting that God would provide for him. "Let no man's heart fail because of him," he said to Saul. According to 1 Samuel 17:32, "Your servant will go and fight with this Philistine." David related his experiences of defending his father's sheep from lions and bears in the past, crediting God's protection for his triumphs. Speaking to Saul, he said, "The Lord who delivered me from the paws of the bear, and the lion will deliver me from the hand of this Philistine." David was unfazed by Goliath's stature or reputation because he had unwavering faith in God's omnipotence and sovereignty. As soon as the fight started, David threw a stone at Goliath, striking him in the forehead and causing him to fall to the ground. After severing Goliath's head with his own sword, David declared, "Today the Lord will deliver you into my hand, and I will strike you down and cut off your head," crediting the Lord with his victory. "And I will give the dead bodies of the host of the Philistines this day to the birds of the air and to the wild beasts of the earth, that all the earth may know that there is a God in Israel." David's profound trust in God's ability to deliver him, even in the face of seemingly insurmountable odds, was a testament to the depth of his faith and the reason God chose him to be the future king of Israel. Number 3. Respect for authority. David always respected Saul's status as the Lord's anointed king. Even in the face of Saul's repeated attempts to kill him and his own legitimate claim to the throne, Saul was hunting David in the wilderness in 1 Samuel 24, not realizing that he and his men were holed up in a cave. "This is the day that the Lord said to you, Behold, I will give your enemy into your hand, and you shall do to him as it shall seem good to you." David's friends urged him to seize the opportunity and murder Saul. But even when he had the chance, David chose not to hurt Saul. He said to his men, "The Lord forbids that I should do this thing to my Lord, the Lord's anointed, to put out my hand against him, seeing he is the Lord's anointed." Even in the face of injustice and personal danger, David's unwavering respect for God's chosen leader demonstrated a heart that was obedient to God's timing and will. No matter how bad the situation, he realized that it was not his place to take matters into his own hands and remove Saul from power. God selected David to be the future king in large part because of his display of honor and submission to the rightful ruler, even when it went against his own interests. Number 2. Genuine repentance. David showed a remarkable willingness to confess his sins and ask God for forgiveness when faced with them. The prophet Nathan chastised David in 2 Samuel 12 for his adulterous relationship with Bathsheba and the murder of her husband, Uriah, that followed. After Nathan told David a story about a wealthy man stealing the poor man's favorite lamb, David was infuriated by the unfairness of it all. Nathan said, "You were the man at that point," revealing the true nature of David's transgression. David answered in a humble and repentant manner, saying, "I have sinned against the Lord." Psalm 51, in which David begs for God's pardon and a pure heart, is a potent expression of this sincere admission of his sin and his subsequent repentance. He screams, "O God, have pity on me in accordance with your unwavering love, blot out my transgressions in accordance with your abundant mercy. Cleanse me from my sin and wash me thoroughly from my iniquity." In sharp contrast to Saul's tendency of offering justifications and assigning blame, David was willing to accept full responsibility for his transgressions and pursue reconciliation with God, even if it meant bearing the consequences of his deeds. David's life was characterized by a sincere repentance and desire for holiness, which was a major factor in God's decision to make him king of Israel. Number 1. God's sovereignty. The basic idea that God is sovereign in choosing leaders is what made David the winner over Saul. God makes decisions according to standards that may not coincide with those of this world because his ways are higher than ours. Samuel discovered that the Lord sees not as man sees. Man looks on the outward appearance, but the Lord looks on the heart, when he was sent to anoint a new king from among Jesse's sons. The appointment of David as king emphasizes God's right to choose leaders who are obedient to him, regardless of their upbringing or initial credentials. This fact serves as a reminder that God's decisions are always predicated on his perfect wisdom and plan, not on human logic or expectations. From a human standpoint, Saul might have seemed like the perfect candidate for king because of his great stature and military prowess. However, God noticed that David's heart was not entirely given over to him, so knowing that David's heart was after God's own heart, God chose David, the unlikely shepherd boy. This idea of God's sovereignty over the election of leaders is a potent one because it serves as a reminder that God is unaffected by prejudice or human standards. He selects people based on their moral character, faith, and willingness to submit to his will. David's life and reign as Israel's king serve as a testament to the fact that God frequently chooses the ridiculous things of this world to shame the wise. God's ways are not our ways. May we take inspiration from Saul and David's opposing paths as we endeavor to do God's will, and may our lives demonstrate a heart that is totally given over to the Lord. If you liked our video, please hit the like button and subscribe to our YouTube channel.